My name is Clint Smith. Today, I'm about to teach you about the danger of silence. Being a teacher, I have been able to figure out this message and figure out why speech is so important in our lives. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., in the 1968 speech, where he reflects upon the civil rights movement, states, "In the end, we will not remember the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends." As a teacher, I've internalized this message. Every day, all around us, we see the consequences of silence manifest themselves in the form of discrimination, violence, genocide, and war. In the classroom, I challenge my students to explore the silences in their own lives through poetry. We work together to fill these spaces, to recognize them, to name them, to understand that they don't have to be sources of shame. In the effort to create a culture within my classroom where the students feel safe sharing their intimacies of their own silences, I have 4 core principles posted on the board that sits in front of my class, which every student signs in the beginning of the year. Read critically, write consciously, speak clearly, tell your truth. And I find myself thinking a lot about that last point. Tell your truth. And I realized that if I was going to have my students speak up, I would have to tell my truth and tell them when I failed to do so. So I tell them growing up, as a kid in a Catholic family in New Orleans, during Lent, I was always taught that the most meaningful thing one could do was to give something up. Sacrifice something you typically indulge in to prove to God you understand His sanctity. I've given up soda, McDonald's, French fries, French kissing, and everything in between. But one year, I gave up speaking. I figured the most valuable thing I could sacrifice was my own voice. But it was like I hadn't even realized I had given it up a long time ago. I spent so much of my life telling people the things they wanted to hear instead of the things they needed to. Told myself I wasn't meant to be anyone's conscience because I still had to figure out being my own. So sometimes I just wouldn't say anything, appeasing ignorance with my own silences, unaware that validation doesn't need words to endorse its existence. When Christian was beaten up for being gay, I put my hands in my pocket and walked with my head down as if I didn't even notice. I couldn't use my locker for weeks because the bolt on the lock reminded me of the one I put on my lips when the homeless man was looking at me, looking for affirmation that he was there. But I was too busy looking at the screen of my Apple instead of feeding him one. When the woman at the fundraising gala said, "I'm so proud of you. It must be so hard teaching these poor, unintelligent children," I bit my lip because apparently we needed her money more than my students needed their dignity. We spend so much time listening to the things people are saying that we rarely pay attention to things they don't. Silence is the residue of fear. It's the feeling when your flaws gut-wrenching guillotine your tongue. It's the air retreating from your chest because it doesn't feel safe in your lungs. Silence is Rwandan genocide. Silence is Katrina. It's what you hear when there aren't enough body bags left. It's the sound after the noose is already tied. It is charring. It is chains. It is privilege. It is pain. There is no time to pick your battles when your battles have already picked you. I will not let silence wrap itself around my indecision. I will tell Christian that he's a lion, a sanctuary of bravery and brilliance. I will ask that homeless man his name and how his day was, because sometimes all we want to feel is human. I will tell that woman that my students can talk about transcendation like their last name was thorough. And just because you watched one episode of The Wire doesn't mean you know anything about my kids. So this year, instead of giving something up, I will live every day as there's a microphone tucked under my nose, a stage on the underside of inhabitation. Because who has to have a soapbox when all you need is your voice? Thank you.